Hey everyone, welcome to the call. It's our 14th core R&D call. As you know, the purpose of these calls are for core contributors to present what they've been working on, updating the community on what's coming, and brainstorming with core working groups and community members like you to bring you the news. I'll paste in the chat and show notes a link to the Graphs ecosystem calendar. That's the link you should use to be subscribed to future calls. I will just paste it here in a moment. And yeah, so as you guys know, last month we've talked about Graph Day and GraphHack, two successful events organized by the Graph in San Francisco. It was an event for the whole Web3 ecosystem. It went very well, and we've listed a couple of major announcements there. I hope you've been monitoring things on Twitter, also Discord, and we can take today's call to hear from core devs on a few of these things. I'm going to just highlight some of these announcements, and then you can take the time to go through almost all of them. So the first one was we've announced new core dev brands. Messari and GraphOps have joined, and we're very happy to have them, obviously. And we'll take the time to get to know these teams in a little bit and figure out how they are contributing to the space. We've also had this major announcement on the hosted service that there's also a blog post we'll be sunsetting, and we have Dizzy with us on the call that's going to walk us through this plan, but also we can talk about how we can then make sure that the decentralized network will be supporting this change with the proper QoS, that is quality of service. Another great thing was that we are adopting a layer 2 solution for greater economic efficiency, but also overall better experience for the different network stakeholders. And another big one was Substreams. Substreams is a new paradigm that brings massive boosts in indexing performance of up to 100x, leveraging parallelization. And it's still early days for Substreams, but it's a very, very promising tech. And we did take some time yesterday or 2 days ago, I believe, to go over Substreams during an Indexed Office Hours episode. So if you've missed that, please get on YouTube, search for Indexed Office Hours, and you can hear from Alex from Streaming Fast on what this thing actually is. Last but not least, we've also mentioned Arweave support in the hosted service in beta. We've had Sam from Arweave joining Graph Day and talk about this. It's still in beta for now, but yeah, we'd love to get some feedback from the community. Cool, that was a lot. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about all of these and hear more from core devs, not specifically Substreams. As mentioned, we've been covering these over different channels, so we're not going to be doing that today. And yeah, so that'll be sunsetting hosted service, multi-chain indexing, rewards, Epoch Block Oracle, protocol, migration to Arbitrum and Arweave, and better support for file data sources. So it's a lot. Let's get started. Do we have Vincent from Messari on the call? Vincent, do you want to say hi and talk about this new core dev grant?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Pedro. My name is Vincent. I lead the on-chain data team at Messari. And for those who don't know, Messari is one of the leading research and data analytics firms in the crypto and Web3 space. So we are super excited to be a part of the Graph ecosystem, to be one of the core teams. And before going into the grant, I want to talk a little bit about our vision. Messari shares the same vision as the Graph, and that is to build the
Sorry, I'm trying to mute. Oh yeah, there you go. Sorry, Vincent.
Yeah, no worries. Anyways, to build an open and decentralized internet, we need permissionless and accessible data. And today, the data is open and permissionless, but they are not very accessible, meaning that it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to get the raw data out of the blockchain and make meaning of them. And the Graph does a very good job at solving that problem with all the subgraphs acting as mini data pipelines. and makes it very easy for people to query them using GraphQL. So that's great, but we want to take it one step further. So with the $12.5 million grant, we want to build 200 subgraphs over the course of next 2 years. And the key here is to focus on standardization. And to elaborate on that, a lot of the subgraphs today, they're built in different ways. They have different kind of schemas. They have different kind of definitions. It's not very easy to use them, although they have a lot of data. It usually takes days, if not a week or two, to understand the schema, to understand what things are what, how they are tied back to the, oops, what's going on? Okay, so standardization. We want to build the subgraphs in a standardized way such that the same protocol, so protocols in the subgraphs in the same protocol type share the same schema, meaning that not only they will have the same entities and the same fields, they'll also have the same metrics, and each metric will be defined, aggregated, and normalized in the same way, such that the end user, it's very easy to use that data. You don't need any additional transformation, additional tweaking on your end. You can use it right away. So with that, I want to show, I can share my screen, right? Okay, cool. Can you guys see this?
Yep, we can.
Yep. Yeah, so this is basically our subgraph repo where we host all the subgraphs we are working on. These are all the schemas or the standardized schemas that we've put together. These schemas are very big. Oops, is it? Can you guys still see it?
Okay, can you try again, please?
Yeah, I believe I'm presenting right now.
Oh, you are. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, anyways, so this is the schema. Every single subgraph in that category will follow that schema. So what I showed was the DEX-AMM schema. As you can see here, we have like a list of, I don't know, close to 20 DEXs that follow exact schema. Some of them are designed very differently, like Curve, Uniswap, Balance, and Bancor. They're all very different DEXs. But now with the standardization, you can query them in exactly the same way. And the same apply for lending protocols, CDPs, yield aggregators, all of them. Everything that has like this symbol, it's already built. You can click into it, for example. It will take you to the subgraph, and of course you can look at all the stuff using the subgraph playground, and furthermore, we actually built this little website, subgraphs.xyz, where it will allow you to visualize all the data in your subgraph. And because of the standardization, oops. Yeah, anyways, I'm pretty much done. So basically, because of the standardization work, it's really easy for us to build something like that for you to visualize the data across all the subgraphs. Yeah, and that really helps us with validating the data, visualizing the data. And so far, we've had close to, I think, 40 to 50 subgraphs built and deployed across various networks. We have close to 30 amazing subgraph contributors. Some of them are on the call today. I can see there's 0xB1, Chris, Dylan, Harsh, and huge shout out to these guys for the amazing work in the past couple months. And yeah, and all the subgraphs we built are free, open, and they are open source. You can look at the source code yourself. You can start using that data, start contributing, and give us any feedback. Yeah, that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much. Pretty exciting work for sure. We will know more about these standards for sure in the future. We'll have time to cover this. Pretty cool. Moving forward, let's hear also, I believe we have Abel in the call from GraphOps, correct? You want to talk about GraphOps? I think it's well known to the community by now, but yeah. Abel, can you speak? Okay, you can unmute now.
Amazing. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Wonderful. I was just having some issues there. Thank you so much for the introduction. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and excited to get into it. I'm going to try not to share my screen because of the issues we're having, but we'll rock and roll. So I'm Abel and I am from GraphOps. And I'm incredibly excited today to talk to you guys about the grant we've received from the Graph Foundation. So we are super mission aligned with the Graph. A lot of what Vincent was saying, we definitely echo, and we are excited about is a very sophisticated protocol in the Web3 ecosystem. And nowhere is that more true than the concentration of gigabrains that we have amongst the core developers. And we're fortunate to be able to join the ranks of core developers. So just to give you guys an idea of some of the things that we're going to be working on as a part of the grant that we've received, that is everything that includes protocol economics and network operations, core development, and indexer experience. And to dive more specifically into each of those sections, within protocol economics and network operations, we'll be exploring what new versions of curation will look like. And we're already in the works with many other folks in the protocol economics group to discuss what that looks like. We're going to be revisiting delegation and seeing how we can improve that, and also furthering our work on the Epoch Block Oracle. As it relates to core development, we'll be focusing on developing and maintaining core network subgraphs, working on everything that is related to smart contract development in the protocol, and also building the gossip network, which is something we've discussed quite a bit about in the past and excited to be able to get to work on. So for more information on the gossip network, it'll be unlocking a new design space for protocol mechanics and coordination amongst indexers. So if you haven't already seen in the theme of today's conversation, a lot of the work that we're going to be doing is around indexers. And the third and final piece, indexer experience, is kind of where we're going to spend a lot of energy and effort. So we'll be launching some Kubernetes-centric automation and tooling for indexers. We believe that helping indexers run better operations will overall increase the quality of service of the network, and therefore make the Graph an even more credible option for people who are looking to get data from blockchains. In the near term, we'll be focused on the Kubernetes-centric automation tooling and the gossip network. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. We're going to be launching some GRCs to kind of solicit some feedback from the community and get certain perspectives. We'll be continuing index office hours. So I linked a video that Pedro mentioned, which was a recording of the Substreams episode we did this Tuesday. We believe that's an important venue for educating the indexers that exist in the ecosystem, and also encouraging new indexers to join the ecosystem to, again, increase that quality of service. For us, indexers are our main constituent, and we will be working incredibly hard to improve everything that is around the indexer experience and the indexer stack. So thank you all for listening to this short introduction about us. We are beyond excited to be amongst such gigabrains, and excited for what the future holds. So thank you all.
Thanks, Abel. Thank you so much. Very cool. Okay, so I do have more moderation controls now. So if you guys want to speak, do let me know in the chat. I've tried to disable screen sharing and whiteboards. Hopefully this will go well. So next, we're going to be talking about deprecating the hosted service, as mentioned. So I will give Dizzy the opportunity to speak about this, and then we can have also Adam talking about the Epoch Block Oracle, and how we can get multi-chain indexing rewards on the decentralized network. So Dizzy, just give me 1 second to allow you to talk. Let's see, ask to unmute. Yeah, can you try now, please?
Yep.
Perfect.
Thanks, Pedro. Can you let me share my screen too? I promise I won't draw anything untoward.
You promise?
I promise.
Okay.
I will show you
That's
guys
good.
slides though, so there is that downside, unfortunately for you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just make sure I can. Yeah. There you go. You should be able to. Please let me know if that's
Thank you. All right, so we're just going to talk briefly. There's actually only 2 or 3 slides, but it's helpful to see it versus me talking through it and sort of trying to remember it. We are working to sunset the hosted service and transition all the traffic over to the network where it belongs. And so the plan is pretty straightforward. Starting in Q3, so upcoming, we're going to stop allowing new subgraphs on the hosted service to be created when the network supports that change. So the obvious sort of first pass there is going to be around Ethereum mainnet. So what we're basically going to wind up doing is on the hosted service, if you try to create a new subgraph, you'll now have to select the which chain you want. And if you pick Ethereum, because that's supported on the network, we're going to redirect you over to Studio and you have to create the subgraph over there. So this is going to help us because it's going to start encouraging people to start from the very beginning on the network instead of the hosted service. So we're rolling out those pieces in Q3. In Q4, and sort of the next step is then to stop upgrades for hosted service accounts, or sorry, that should be subgraphs. So if you have a subgraph that you want to deploy a new version of that is currently on hosted service, we're going to force you to move it over to Studio and deploy it onto the network. Now we're also going to have migration tools and grants and other tools and sort of levers, if you will, to encourage people to make that transition. But between these 2 phases, we hope that most of the traffic winds up shifting over to the network, by the end of Q4, and then in Q1 of next year is when we sort of do the cleanup and all of that other stuff. Now, the challenge here is that there's some dependencies, right? So in Q3, we've got to roll out multi-chain support on the network and start the process of adding more chains on the network, which we're on track for right now. There's a couple of new oracles we have to roll out. There's some arbitration stuff the council needs to sort out, but all those pieces in that plan is moving along. So by the end of Q3, we should be able to support non-Ethereum mainnet chains on the network, have it available for rewards and all that jazz. It's going to take time to roll all the chains out because there's a lot of them, but all of the supporting mechanisms will be in place, and we will start methodically working with the foundation and every other core dev to roll each chain out to the network, make sure there's enough indexers, make sure there's node providers and all that jazz. And also sort of by the end of Q3, we'll have a sort of one-click, I don't know if it'll be one click, but 1 or 2 click, whatever, button on the hosted service. So if you go to the hosted service to a subgraph you've already got deployed, you can click a button and it will transfer it over to the Studio for you in a very sort of automated way and make it really easy for you to get onto the network. During Q3, we're also hoping to roll out the L2 support, which will reduce costs and encourage curation and migration. The what else was a question when you're sorting things out, so you can ignore that. But that's sort of the gist of it. And again, just to talk brief, just to recap, we have a multi-phase project. Phase 1 happens starting in Q3, where we're stopping new subgraph deployments. Phase 2 starts in Q4, where we're stopping upgrades, and then phase 3 will be the final sort of migration and cleanup and whatnot. So that's the plan. I will say I've done a couple of these scales of migrations, although they've been data centers and stuff like that before. It always takes longer than you'd like. It's always more complicated than you'd like. But the important thing is to break it down into small steps and just start working it. And so I think sort of Ethereum mainnet, we know it's supported on the network right now. Stopping new subgraphs from being created on the hosted service will stop the growth of the hosted service and start, really kicking into the growth of the network as well, which benefits everybody. So anyway, good stuff all around. Any questions, thoughts? I don't really need any fancy screen drawings or trolling messages though.
Yeah, very exciting.
Cool.
I'll just link also in the chat. You guys should be prepared to start migrating subgraphs over the decentralized network. You can always reach out to a few folks on Discord, but I'm also gonna link here in the YouTube show notes a link to a blog post where you can follow a very nice tutorial, I think, that Simone has drafted. Yeah, so.
I see Kai from Semiotics.
Yeah. Let me give you the, okay, yeah. Go ahead, Kai.
Yeah, hi. Sorry about the noise earlier. I'm in the middle of my commute. So as far as sunsetting the hosted service and migrating some of these other chains onto the distributed net is concerned, what incentive are we offering to indexers in order to get them to jump on board with these new chains, especially things like BSC? They're logistically very complicated to operate on simply because of the sheer size of the chain. I was just hoping that you could address that.
Well, that's something, honestly, that's less of an edge and node thing and more of a Graph Foundation thing. So they're working on a program to, handle that incentivization. But a big part of it too, is just how the network's constructed. If you're the first one on the chain, you will, and the only, or one of the few indexers, and there's a number of subgraphs on there, you will get a significant sort of set of rewards just as part of the natural indexing rewards and those proportions. So that should help, but I do know that the Graph Foundation has some other plans too to help bootstrap that overall effort. So I don't know, Pedro, if you want to talk about those. I know those are we're still working those out. Really what I was describing was the mechanism for doing it, and we're still working out all the other sort of supporting projects to solve that problem.
Yeah, correct. I can probably just add that, yeah, as Dizzy mentioned, there are the protocol incentives. So if indexers want to play by the rules, obviously, and leverage how the market works, there's obviously some incentives there. But I would say that, yes, regarding the foundation, it's still very, very early days. We're trying to figure out what's the best way of doing that in a fair and in a decentralized way, because yes, we do want to have proper QoS support in the network for these chains, and also make sure that we just let the protocol and the protocol economics play out in a fair way. So trying to figure out what the bootstrapping phase could look like and if the foundation can actually help. So we'll probably know more soon.
Yeah, and I can maybe jump in there. So yeah, Pedro, I don't know if it makes sense to segue onto the.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, that's the important thing. Yeah, multi-chain index support network.
Yeah. So that kind of segues, I guess, onto onto the supporting like other chains on the network. And I think I've talked in this group about this. Pedro, I don't know if I can share my screen briefly, but support for multiple chains at the moment. Obviously, only Ethereum indexing is supported. Essentially because there isn't, in order to provide security for the indexing rewards that are provided, there needs to be consensus around the blocks that proof of indexing is being provided for. And so that's essentially something which is currently underway to unblock that. So it's the project which is loosely known as the Epoch Block Oracle, where the epoch is the period of time during which you close an allocation, and it's called the Epoch Block Oracle because essentially it provides blocks for other chains other than mainnet Ethereum, which is that the mainnet Ethereum block is obviously available and verifiable because that's where the indexing is happening, is happening, and there's like essentially the rule is encoded in the Epoch Manager contract, but access to those to other chains' data is not. And so there's this whole piece of work to technically unblock adding chains. And so the first part of that was the data edge, which essentially is just a means of bringing data on chain, which Zach worked on. I think he's talked about here before, and that's essentially been accepted, and we're going to be adopting this sort of data edge-based Oracle pattern. The Epoch Block Oracle itself is essentially the implementation of that, and as folks, Thiago, Filippo, Reg and Node have been working on this, and this is non-trivial because it needs to be a system that's pretty resilient to all sorts of things like gas spiking on Ethereum, to chains behaving in slightly unexpected ways. So this work is in progress, but this is essentially the real meat of this project, and hopefully deploying to testnet more just for our internal testing rather than on the sort of graph protocol testnet this week. There's then updating a bunch of affected components. The idea is that actually indexing other subgraphs should work in a almost exactly the same way as mainnet subgraphs, with some small changes under the hood to the indexer agent. So essentially how it chooses which block to close an allocation for, and also some other changes in the Studio and Explorer, which are sort of can maybe surface more information and be more useful for their users. And then there are some changes to the gateway, a lot of which are already underway. And then we get into the difficulty of adding new networks over time. And Kai, your question kind of did touch on some of the nuance here. There's obviously on any given network, there's a sort of supply-demand dynamic where there are a bunch of subgraphs who want to be deployed on the network. In some cases, we do have indexers who we know support, say, BSC, have BSC archive nodes for other reasons, who are sort of eager to support given network, but we're conscious that we need enough indexes and a diverse set of indexes for all the chains that are being added. So this again is a sort of work in progress in terms of which networks get added and how they get rolled out over time, obviously with a view to Dizzy's point of sort of full support of everything. So like any subgraph could be deployed to the network. And so this is one where we'll be reaching out to indexers, engaging with existing indexes, but also potentially people who aren't running indexes who are quite chain aligned would be a good fit to run into indexes if they're already running archive nodes. So that's essentially where we're currently at. We're pretty close on the technical side to readiness, but then there's a lot of nuance on the actually making sure the network is ready to support things end to end.
Very cool. Thanks, Adam. We're very, very close. Just to add on to, we have something from Brandon Kramer. Yeah, exactly. So Brandon Kramer is saying, for all those indexers who are already working on BSC and other more challenging chains, we would love to hear your feedback, thoughts, so we can continue to integrate these into our docs, etc. Feel free to reach out on Discord. Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. And that's what I was going to mention right now. And as a comment to Dizzy's, as a follow-up comment to Dizzy's comment was that the foundation will indeed work closely with indexers on making sure that they are ready to support these chains. That's something we've done before with the mission control. What I was just saying, that we just don't know exactly how things will work, but obviously the foundation will be involved in making sure that we can teach indexers how to run things. There's also the fire hose, and probably there'll be some workshops. We're still discussing things, but yeah, the foundation will try to obviously make sure that indexers can indeed support these chains properly once ready. Very cool. We're very close. Thanks, Adam. Thank you so much. There was another thing we've mentioned. Maybe you can speak to Arweave that's been announced on during Graph Day, and we've also been talking about having better support for file data sources. Could we talk about what is it that we have currently with Arweave, how this whole file indexing or better support will look like, how far along are we, and how the two may be related?
Sure, yes. So I can actually talk, I guess, a little bit about how ways in which they're not related or not the same thing as well. So Arweave support, just as a reminder, this is indexing Arweave as a blockchain, chain blocks with transactions, rather than Arweave as a file storage network. So there's an initial implementation which essentially means there's a Firehose compatible or a Firehose integration of the Arweave client, which exists and is up and running and is essentially configured on the hosted service. So essentially this means that you can create subgraphs based on Arweave blocks and transactions. So it's put out there. There are some things which we know that this sort of doesn't support, for example, like bundler transactions. So bundler is essentially a way of batching up many transactions which then get submitted onto Arweave. So it's almost kind of like an Arweave rollup, which actually I think Pedro from our discussions and discovery actually makes up a large amount of what's going on to Arweave at the moment. So those are the kinds of things that aren't supported, but we're at the point where it is available, and we essentially need to start gaining a bit of user feedback and understand use cases for this, and also think areas where it falls short. So for example, we've already added sort of better support for sort of decoding, or at least in documentation, and sort of like address filtering, where I think we were using public keys initially. So essentially we'll need to build this out. Like I think an obvious use case for the data at the moment would be something that looks like an Arweave block explorer could be built, because you're triggering off transactions and blocks. But yeah, need to essentially do the work and outreach to get this feedback and work out what would be useful to the community. If it is lots of bundler support, then and bundlers like interrogation is an important part of what people would want from a block explorer. Obviously, the integration is not going to be quite what people need quite yet, but that's where Arweave is at, and I think we need to just do a bit more sort of proactive outreach and also building ourselves. So that's then disjoint and separate from file data sources. So this one, and actually at the top here, file data sources, which has been a GIP in the forum for a while. That work is in progress in terms of the initial implementation. This will enhance essentially the existing IPFS support, which it currently exists in GraphNode, but it's quite brittle, and it's also implemented in a way that can never be made deterministic. Just to elaborate a little bit more there, obviously one of the key value propositions of subgraphs is determinism, which is to say that when if you query one indexer for a subgraph as a given block and get data back, you then query another one, you'd always get the same data back. With IPFS, because you have very inconsistent file availability, maybe one indexer can't find a given file on IPFS, maybe when one indexer indexed IPFS file was available and then later it becomes unavailable, you have this inconsistency, which then can lead to lack of determinism, which is sort of problematic, because then you don't know why you're getting different results, you don't know which one is accurate, and so resolving that is a non-trivial problem. But this initial implementation won't give us deterministic IPFS indexing to start with, but it will set us on a path to getting there. We've taken the sort of pragmatic approach of creating this more robust implementation where we can then get more feedback, add more other you notice it's called file data sources, not IPFS data sources, because it is essentially done in, so Leo's been working on this done in a way that's agnostic to the precise type of file. So we'd be able to add fetching for Arweave files or files from other storage networks. So again, yeah, getting user feedback, understanding what features need to be added, but then also once we have that information, that knowledge, moving towards deterministic support, which there is quite a broad sort of solution space for, and there are trade-offs between all of them, but we want to do that and want to have a slightly more informed viewpoint. And that's those two things which are kind of similar but different.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that out, Adam. Any questions here? I guess that will unlock a fairly. I mean, we all have this NFT. We've had this need to better serve the NFT community, let's say, and hear their problems. So maybe that's something that obviously hopefully we'll be able to help out with in the future. And that's apparently very, very soon. It's coming. Any questions on this, or should we move on to L2 Arbitrum and hear from the protocol team? We have Pablo and Ariel in here. If no questions, then Pablo, you are now co-host, so You can share, you can talk, you can do whatever, but please do not draw funny pictures.
That's good. Yeah, if someone tries to improve my presentation, we'll see. So, okay, I'm Pablo. Good to see you all. I work in the Oracle team in the smart contracts at Edge and Node. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the recent proposals we've put up on the forums for the L2 scaling and scaling to Arbitrum in particular. Let me see if I can share the screen. Let me find the right window. Okay, can you all see this? Perfect.
Yes,
okay, so since I'm in the smart contracts team, this is going to be very focused on the smart contract side of moving to L2. There's going to be a lot of other off-chain components that need to be changed for the L2 deployment, and I'll touch on those briefly, but those are probably going to be updates for future calls probably, because a lot of the work on that is just starting right now. So there are two GIPs, and I'm going to go through both. The first one that has been up on the forum for a while already is GIP 31. That is about having a bridge to move graph tokens from mainnet up to Arbitrum 1. That is the Arbitrum layer 2 that is connected to mainnet. And this is actually quite straightforward in terms of like the ways you can do a token bridge between a layer 2 and a layer 1. And basically we have followed the interfaces that are proposed by Arbitrum for their default bridge implementations, and we just added a few things. So in this sense, it's quite a straightforward design for a bridge. We've added upgrade and pause functions to the bridge because obviously, since this is going to be experimental for a while, we're going to be trying new features and trying new things. So being able to upgrade to upload new features and then pause it if something it looks like it's going wrong, then that's pretty important, and we need governance to be able to do that. But also we added a separate bridge escrow contract. So the actual bridge, the contract that holds the tokens is separate from the contract that sends and receives the tokens. And then this allows us to have an escape hatch in the future. If something goes terribly wrong and Arbitrum disappears from the face of the earth, then we can still recover the tokens from there because we just approve a contract or some other account to manage the funds there and to recover them in some way, maybe with a Merkle tree route or something like that. And then finally, the other big thing that we added here is being able to do call hooks when you're sending tokens to L2 in particular. And this is something that the default Arbitrum bridge had for a while, and then they removed it, and now they're adding it back. So in the end, we might actually end up using their approach to do this interface, but for now, it's a custom implementation. And the idea is when you send tokens from L1 to L2, there are some addresses that need to be whitelisted, and those addresses are able to send data with call data for a transaction to that L2 destination where you're sending the tokens. And we'll show an example of why this is useful in a minute when I talk about the other JP, because we're going to use that straight away. But basically, regular users wouldn't be able to use this because it's kind of risky if you have your contract calling arbitrary contracts, and we don't want to expose the bridge to anything. But for protocol contracts that need to send specific data atomically together with tokens, then we'll have that ability through this bridge. So the pull request that implements this set of contracts is up, and it's being audited right now. So hopefully it'll be ready to try on mainnet relatively soon. And then I think, oh yeah, I can show a little bit of how this works. I don't want to get into too much detail, but the basic idea is when you want to send tokens from L1 to L2, then you call the L1 graph token gateway and say, I want to do an outbound transfer. You first need to approve the gateway to take the tokens from you. And that gateway is going to put those tokens into the bridge escrow contract. And it's going to send what Arbitrum calls a retriable ticket that is a ticket for a transaction in L2. And that's going to be redeemed in L2, so that the layer 2 blockchain is going to run that transaction. That's going to call the L2 graph token gateway, and that's going to mint new tokens in L2. So on the L1 side, any tokens that we send to L2 are going to stay in that bridge escrow contract locked until you bring them back to L1. And on the L2 side, we'll mint tokens that are backed by the tokens on L1. So any token on L2, and this is very important, it's going to be very, very important in JP34 as well. Any token that we have in L2 is actually backed by a token in L1. So conceptually, the graph token still lives in Ethereum mainnet. And what we have in L2 is kind of a mirror of those tokens. And then when you want to send tokens back to L1 from L2, you do the same thing. You call outbound transfer, but this time on the L2 side. And the tokens that you had there are going to be burned, and then they're going to be released from escrow on the other side. So far, so good. So that's the bridge. If anyone has any questions so far, I'm going to move on to the bigger GIP that is GIP34 for the DevNet. So carrying on, this one is quite a big JP. If you've seen it in the forums, it's quite long. So I'll try to do a summary and not get too much into the weeds. We're proposing an Arbitrum DevNet, and DevNet is kind of a tricky word here because we're not saying we're going to do this just in testnet. The DevNet is an experimental deployment tool too, where we can try all of the mechanisms, all of the whole protocol, having subgraphs there with even query fees, and so indexers can stake in L2, delegators can delegate, curators can curate on subgraphs. So we have a mirrored deployment of the graph protocol on the Arbitrum mainnet deployment. This will have one thing that is different from L1, one main thing that is different from L1, and that thing is indexer rewards. So we call it a DevNet because it's not going to have indexer rewards at first, but we are changing, and the GIP here proposes changing the way rewards work so that when we want to enable them, we can have rewards on L1 and on L2 at the same time, and we can have both networks running in parallel for a while and gradually transition the community towards the full L2 deployment. So there's a future, a near future, where we're going to have stuff running on L1 and stuff running on L2, and this will help us gain that everything's working fine, that it's our needs, and that, yeah, everything is okay. And then gradually there's going to be more rewards on L2 until it's clear that L2 is better because the gas costs are so much lower. And so hopefully that means eventually we can disable the L1 deployment or disable the rewards on L1, and then everyone is going to be on L2 and no one is going to care about maintenance anymore. So we'll see how that future ends up happening, but for now this is the plan that we have, or what that we're proposing. So this new rewards mechanism is designed so that we only mint rewards on L1, sorry. And this is very important because of what we said before, that conceptually we want the graph token to remain a mainnet token, and we want every token in L2 to be backed by a token in L1. We don't want a scenario where someone somehow compromises the L2 side and they can bridge tokens back to L1 that didn't actually exist in L1 and then create new graph tokens. Sorry. So that's the basic idea. So right now, the way rewards are minted is whenever an indexer closes an allocation, and I'm going to come back to the slide, but let's see. This is the way rewards are currently minted in the protocol. So when an indexer closes an allocation, this is a transaction to the staking contract, and that staking contract is going to call what we call the rewards manager. That is a separate contract that has all of the calculations of what are the rewards that correspond for this subgraph, and therefore what are the rewards that correspond for this allocation and this indexer and its delegators. And then the rewards manager is going to mint those tokens. It's going to mint fresh new tokens and give them to the staking contract, which then gives them to the indexer and makes it available for delegators to claim them as well. So we're changing this to a new reward issuance mechanism where, like right now, issuance and distribution are together. We mint and then immediately we send it to the staking contract to send it to indexers. And this happens when an allocation is closed. Now we want to separate this and we want to mint the tokens at a different time. So what we have is a new contract called the reservoir, and we have those contracts on L1 and on L2, the L1 reservoir and the L2 reservoir. And the L1 reservoir has a drip function. And certain actors that we're going to call keepers are able to call this L1 reservoir drip function that mints all of the tokens that we're going to need that we could possibly give out for indexer rewards over the next week or so. And so the reservoir is going to keep those tokens there until when an allocation is closed. Here, we have the same mechanism as before, but now instead of the rewards manager minting the new tokens, it's going to ask the reservoir, what are the accumulated rewards for this period? And then it's going to use that to say, these are the rewards that we need to give to this particular indexer. And instead of minting them, it just transfers them from the reservoir to the staking contract and then to the indexer. So we go from minting and sending immediately to pre-minting, keeping them in the reservoir, and then calculating how much we need to give out and just transferring them at the end when we want to close an allocation and reward an indexer. So let me see if I forgot anything from the slide. Okay, so yeah, going back to this issuance, here is an example of why we want to have those call hooks on the bridge. When we're dripping rewards on a one, we're calling drip the keeper, which in the latest proposal, keepers are indexers actually, who can do this through the indexer agent, and they can get a small but hopefully enough to cover gas costs reward, a keeper reward for calling this. And then we mint those tokens, and we mint everything that we need for L1 and for L2, and then we send those tokens to the L2 reservoir on L2. And that needs to use the bridge because we're sending GRT from L1 to L2, and that needs to happen through the bridge. But we also want to tell the L2 reservoir how much, what is the amount of rewards that you need to distribute over the next week? What is the supply base that we used? What is the issuance rate that we use? So that the L2 reservoir, when the rewards manager asks it, what are the rewards for this period, it can give the right answer based on the amount that it has received. And we want to do that in one go. It's kind of messy if we need to send two separate messages. So we're just sending that to. We do it through this call hook. So the L2 reservoir has a receive drip function that can only be called through the call hook from the bridge. And it's going to update some of the internal variables so that we can keep those values. I'm not going to get into the detail of this maths here. You can see that in the GIP, but just a quick mention that we used to calculate the function that we have in the first line here.
Your audio is getting a bit choppy. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can stop video. There we go. Is that a bit better?
Let's see. Yeah, so far so good.
Okay. So back to these maths. The only thing I wanted to mention here is we used to have a rewards per signal function in the rewards manager, and that's where we had the issuance rate and the kind of inflation formula for how to mint new GRT. Now we're replacing that with a global rewards, so not just rewards per signal, but rewards, period. And that is going to have a lambda factor that we have here, that is, or the L2 rewards fraction, that is how much of those global rewards are we sending to L2. And then the rewards manager will still compute the rewards per signal, but it'll use that global rewards for, tell me what the rewards for this layer are that is kept by the L1 reservoir. Hopefully that's clear. There's a lot more detail into these formulas in the GIP if you want to take a closer look. So I already explained this. Now going to what is our plan in general? Where do we stand with all of this? So for GIP 34, there's 2 pull requests. And for GIP 31, there's 1 pull request for the bridge, which is being audited. For GIP 34, there are 2 pull requests. The first one is being audited right now. The second one will probably go in an audit very soon. But even if we only have that first PR audited, we should be able to start the deployment, at least of the L2 side of things, of this new rewards mechanism. So with the merge coming, we know that Rinkeby is not going to be around for much longer. So we need to test all of this in testnet first. And for that, we need a new testnet because we need to deploy the testnet to Gurley. So that's going to happen first. And then once we have the Gurley testnet working, we can deploy that Arbitrum GRT bridge. Obviously, we've already done like mock deployments of this to try it out, but that bridge we need to deploy to a full testnet that is running and that has subgraphs and everything. So we're going to deploy the bridge there, and then we can deploy the L2 side of the DevNet with all of the contracts on L2. With this new rewards mechanism, it just won't have any rewards because it will never receive a drip from L1. And so once we have that, we can start testing the L2 side of things as much as we want. And then eventually we can deploy all of the L1 changes that start dripping rewards to L2. And that should include the second PR. That second PR adds that keeper reward for drip so that someone is incentivized to call it. And then eventually we can initialize the indexer rewards on L2. So what I've just explained is the plan for testnet. We want to do the same in mainnet, not necessarily going through all of the steps in testnet before we go to mainnet. Once we've tested the L2 side of things, so once we've done step 4 on the testnet side of the plan, we should be able to start deploying stuff into mainnet as well and running steps 1, 2, and 3. So deploying all of the L2 side of things, having a devnet, having indexers staking in L2, subgraph developers deploying subgraphs to L2 in an experimental manner, but still. And then eventually, step 4 of the mainnet plan, deploy all of the L1 changes and actually start dripping rewards to L2 as well. And then this is going to be up to governance, so it's probably going to be a separate GIP or a GGP. That is, how do we actually do that plan of going from 0 rewards to 100% rewards on L2? Or maybe the end game is not 100%, but we'll see about that. So that's kind of the general plan of having the graph protocol running on L2. Now, there's going to be a lot of things to do after that. So one of the things that we're working on, and I'm actually experimenting with this right now, is how do we facilitate people moving stake or curation signal from L1 to L2? So there are some tricks that we can do where we can use the bridge with the call hooks as well, or we can use separate messaging to send for instance, a subgraph at the GNS level, send it to L2 as if you were doing an upgrade, but instead of upgrading to another subgraph on L1, you upgrade to a subgraph on L2, and then you provide a way for curators to claim that signal on L2. And we can do the same thing for delegators and indexers as well. So this is going to take a bit more time because it's kind of complex. How do you do that safely and properly? But we are working on that as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is only the smart contract side. There is a lot of work for the products, adapting the Explorer, the Subgraph Studio, the indexer agent, the oracles, and so on. So like we're doing a whole new deployment with some particularities, and there's going to be a lot of teams working on this. So yeah, there's a lot more to come. So hopefully there's going to be more updates coming soon. And I think that's all I had. So if there's any questions, I'm here. I know that's a lot to take in. So
yes, we do have questions. Thank you so much, Pablo. Jim, let's start with you. Just give me 1 second. I'll allow you to speak. Ask to unmute. Okay. Can you try now, Jim, please?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Welcome. Hey.
Hey, how you doing? Pablo, thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to emphasize the importance that we get as many eyes as possible on this excellently written GIP that Pablo has put on the forums. It's been there for 13 days now. We sometimes have a little bit of issue with, I guess, agility, making things progress in a timely fashion. And this is a really important and really complex GIP. So, you know, we have the brain trust on the call here. So I'm just, you know, I'm just asking all of you, if you have time, is to take a little bit of time to look at this on the forums and add your commentary. Because as Pablo says, there's a lot more than just this initial GIP required. There's a lot of teams that need to work on specific pieces to make this work. So just a plea really that everybody, if you have some time to read it, it's very well written, very readable, a bit of maths in there. Please take the time to read it and add your commentary if you have something interesting to add to the conversation. Thanks. Thank you, Pedro. Thanks, Pablo.
Thanks, Jim. That's a great point.
Yep. Monitor the Zoom window, but I don't see anyone raising their hand. Yeah, I think that's it. Yep. Thank you so much, Pablo. Yeah, as Jim mentioned, this is it's going to be a big lift. To take the time to read the GIP, definitely, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, we've seen people asking for this, and it's going to bring a lot of great benefits, not just economic efficiency, but also the experience, as mentioned before. It's going to be a lot better. Very nice.
Thanks, Pedro.
Thank you, Ariel, for working on this, and everyone in the indexer experience and protocol economics working group. Okay, so I think we can take the time back, 2 minutes. We're almost out of time anyway. If there are no further questions, we can wrap up, and I will see you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you all for joining. Bye all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.